Alright, Cowboys Nation, let's get into it because there's a lot to unpack. The big question swirling around right now is all about George Pickens and whether or not the Dallas Cowboys really have the flexibility to lock him down long term. Jerry Jones came out with that confident smile of his and said the team has the room to make it happen. And to be fair, when Jerry talks about cap space, you never really know if he's exaggerating a little or if he's dead on. But in this case, he's not far off at all. The Cowboys actually do have the tools to make a deal happen if they want to. And that deserves a closer look because the numbers tell a very interesting story. Right now, the raw cap figure doesn't seem like much. It looks tight. Not exactly the kind of budget that screams blockbuster extension for a star receiver. But here's the thing. Those base numbers do not show the actual flexibility the front office built into these contracts. Dallas has structured deals in a way that almost invites risk, and when you start to pull those levers, suddenly, the picture looks very different. For example, a restructure on Dak Prescott's contract alone frees up over $30 million. That's one move. Then you look at CeeDee Lamb, another nearly $20 million freed up. Add an Osa Odigizua, that's another chunk of money. Tyler Smith's deal can also be shifted to free nearly $18 million. You keep stacking these restructures together, and all of a sudden, you're looking at a war chest, not a bear cupboard. And that's before you even dive into the second layer of decisions. Trevon Diggs, for instance, can save a team close to $9 million with a restructure or over $12 if they want to be aggressive. A veteran like Malik Hooker could be released to free up $7 million if necessary. When you tally up all of these potential adjustments, you're talking about $100 to $150 million in space. That is not small change. That is a complete reshaping of what the roster can afford. So, when Jerry says they can make it happen, he's not wrong. It is absolutely doable. The only real question is whether they want to do it right now or if it makes more sense to wait. Now, that's where it gets interesting with George Pickens. From his perspective, it does not make much sense to jump at an extension today. He knows his value, and if his agent has any say in this, they're going to hold out for top-of-the-market money. And right now, that means something in the range of $26 to $28 million a year, which lines up with what the franchise tag for a wide receiver is projected to be in 2026. If you're Pickens, why rush into a deal unless the Cowboys throw that kind of number at you? You'd want to let your production speak for itself. Finish the season strong and then really push for that figure. From the Cowboys side, it also makes sense to wait. If the price is already hovering around the franchise tag number, the upside to paying early is minimal. It's not like the figure is going to skyrocket much beyond that in the short term. So, letting the year play out, watching how Pickens continues to perform, and then deciding makes a lot of business sense. Still, for the fans, the takeaway is clear. There is no scenario where the Cowboys cannot afford George Pickens. If they want to keep him, the resources are there. The cap is flexible. The deals are structured for this exact purpose, and the only thing holding it up is timing and strategy. While that conversation dominates headlines, there's another name to watch closely, and that's Jaden Blue. After being inactive through the first 4 weeks, whispers around the facility suggest his time might finally be coming. Brian Schottenheimer dropped some praise recently, talking about how Blue has stepped up in practice, showing consistency and flashing that explosive speed. Now, coaches love to hype guys up all the time. So, the natural question is whether this is just talk or if it actually signals a chance for him to crack the lineup. One factor working in his favor is the injury to Miles Sanders. Even if Sanders doesn't miss the game, being banged up might open a small window for Blue to get a few snaps. And here's why that's worth paying attention to. At Texas, Blue had some fumbling issues, but his raw explosiveness was undeniable. He's the kind of back who can give you a home run play out of nowhere. Pairing that style with Javonte Williams, who has been excellent at grinding out yards after contact, who could give Dallas that thunder and lightning combination every offense dreams about. Williams bruises through defenders. Blue hits you with speed and agility, and suddenly the backfield feels dangerous in multiple ways. It does not mean Blue takes over as RB1, but even as a change of pace, he could tilt the field. Of course, the coaching staff has to trust him in pass protection, and that might be the one hurdle keeping him off the field. Hunter Luepke offers that security in blocking, so the Cowboys may decide to keep leaning on him. But with Blue practicing well and showing patience, his shot feels close. Whether it happens this week or not is uncertain, but that storyline is gaining traction and could add a new wrinkle to the offense. Meanwhile, on the defensive side, Cam Smith has been making noise for all the wrong reasons. The Dolphins cut him loose from a non-football injury list and he hit waivers. The Cowboys have cornerback depth issues, so naturally the question popped up, should they take a look? On paper, Smith has the tools. Coming out of South Carolina, his length and speed looked good. He seemed like the kind of athlete who could develop into a starter. But in Miami, things went downhill fast. His rookie year was quiet, and when he got more chances the next season, it was a disaster. Quarterbacks targeted him 20 times, and he gave up 15 catches for nearly 170 yards. Those are numbers that scream liability. So, while some fans see the size and athletic traits and think low-risk gamble, the reality is much harsher. Right now, Cam Smith looks like a bust, and not even one worth a roster spot. Maybe you stash him on a practice squad and hope a change of scenery helps, but even that feels like a stretch. For a team like Dallas, which already has young corners trying to work back from injuries, it makes little sense to spend energy on a reclamation project when healthier and more reliable options are close to returning. That's the kind of balancing act this team faces every week. They're evaluating the roster, juggling the cap, and keeping an eye on long-term stars like Pickens, while also figuring out which fringe players might actually contribute. It is a reminder that while we often focus on the big names and the big contracts, depth decisions and small opportunities like Jaden Blue, possibly getting carries, can shift the season's momentum just as much. Alright, let's keep rolling, because the Cowboys situation only gets more layered as we go. We've already touched on the George Pickens contract question and the possibility of Jaden Blue making his first real impact. But there are other moving pieces that deserve attention, especially when you start looking at roster shuffling, practice squad adjustments, and players either stepping into bigger roles or falling out of favor. These smaller moves might not light up the headlines the way a blockbuster contract extension would, but they tell you just as much about how the front office views this team and where they believe the weaknesses lie. One of those recent storylines revolves around linebacker Buddy Johnson. He's no longer with the team after being added to the Colts' active roster. It is one of those situations where you look at the Cowboys' depth at linebacker and feel like they might regret letting him go. But at the same time, was he really making the kind of impact that forced their hand? Johnson flashed a little in the preseason, but once the regular games rolled around, he was more of a depth piece and special teamer than anything else. Some fans argued he was better than Jack Sanborn, but in reality, Johnson was still improving. Dallas losing him doesn't necessarily gut the defense, but it does put more pressure on the rest of the depth chart, which has already been under a microscope this season. Then there is the surprising return of Paris Campbell. Campbell had a brief stint with the Cowboys before, making a few catches and showing flashes of what he could bring to the offense. Injuries derailed that chapter, and he was waived after camp. But now he's back in the building, and while nobody is pretending he's a game-changer at this point in his career, there's still some value in a player with his experience. He's a solid route runner. He knows how to find soft spots in coverage. And with Dallas trying to sort out who can consistently step up behind CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, there's room for a guy like Campbell to carve out a role, whether it's as a depth receiver or just insurance against further injuries. His return is worth keeping an eye on because the Cowboys clearly see something in him to bring him back into the fold. And speaking of depth moves, this is where the Cowboys' roster strategy gets really fascinating. They're constantly walking a tightrope between investing heavily in stars and making sure the supporting cast can hold up under pressure. The salary cap flexibility we talked about earlier doesn't just apply to signing extensions for the big names. It also means the Cowboys can afford to cycle through players, make adjustments, and react to injuries or underperformance without putting themselves in a financial bind. That is why you see them make moves like bringing back Campbell or testing out different linebackers. They're buying time and options while keeping their core intact. Now, looping back to George Pickens for a moment because his situation is really the thread running through everything else here. Every roster tweak, every financial decision, and every minor move ties into the bigger picture of whether the Cowboys can build around a core that includes him. We already established that Dallas has the money if they want to make it happen. What they don't have is clarity on the timing. If Pickens continues to shine, his price tag won't go down. The question is whether Jerry Jones wants to make the move early to send a message that Pickens is the future, or if he prefers to hold the cards until the offseason and let the market settle. Either way, Pickens' play is creating ripple effects across the organization. Because when you know a receiver of his caliber could demand close to $30 million annually, you have to plan every other move around that reality. And it's not just about offense. The Cowboys know that to compete with the best in the league, they need balance on both sides of the ball. The defense has been banged up, especially in the secondary. That is why names like Cam Smith pop up in the rumor mill, even if the reality of signing him doesn't make sense. Injuries to corners like Trevon Diggs have left fans nervous, even though he's starting to look healthier. Deron Bland has been coming back, too, but neither of them have looked completely 100% yet. So, when a name like Smith hits the market, the temptation is there, even if the tape screams otherwise. The truth is, Dallas has young corners waiting in the wings who can step in once they're cleared from injured reserve. Kalen Carson, Ravel Butler, these guys will be available soon, and their upside makes more sense than trying to resurrect a struggling player like Smith. It becomes a question of patience, which isn't always easy in the middle of a season, especially when the team is fighting for position in the standings. But the smart move here is to trust the guys you've already invested in rather than gamble on someone who has shown nothing but struggles at the professional level. So when you put all of this together, the cap flexibility, the George Pickens negotiations, the Jaden Blue storyline, the depth shuffling at linebacker and receiver, And the constant questions about the secondary? You get a picture of a team in transition, but also in control. They're not desperate. They're not scrambling to fill holes. Instead, they're methodically using every lever they've built into their contracts and roster, designed to stay competitive and flexible at the same time. That's the difference between a team that just tries to survive each season and one that consistently positions itself to contend. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Dallas Cowboys. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. Whispers have been swirling through NFL circles, and now the chatter is becoming deafening. Amon-Ra St. Brown has reportedly set his sights on Dallas, sending shockwaves through playbooks and locker rooms alike. Sources close to the wide receiver claimed that the Detroit star, known for his precise routes and relentless work ethic, is leaning toward a move to the Cowboys, a team already hungry for offensive fireworks. The rumor, still unofficial but impossible to ignore, suggests that St. Brown sees Dallas as the perfect stage to elevate his game to the next level. With a quarterback in search of consistent, explosive targets and a coaching staff eager to innovate, the fit seems almost too perfect. Analysts are already imagining the offensive schemes that could emerge if the deal materializes. Dynamic slot routes, midfield seam attacks, and an overall playbook that suddenly looks far more dangerous. Inside sources hint that St. Brown's presence would force defensive coordinators across the league to rethink their entire approach. His combination of speed, agility, and football IQ has always made him a matchup nightmare. But pairing him with a Dallas offense that thrives on creativity could be the spark that ignites a new era in the NFC. Rumor mills are buzzing with speculation about the potential packages, formations, and trick plays that could emerge once St. Brown steps onto the Cowboys' practice field. Of course, nothing is official yet, and fans are holding their breath as discussions reportedly continue behind closed doors. Still, the very idea of St. Brown in silver and blue is enough to make rival defenses sweat and fantasy football owners daydream. If the whispers hold true, Dallas could be on the verge of a seismic shift, one that would see their playbook explode in ways that haven't been seen in years. The league watches, the fans speculate, and the rumor grows. One thing is clear. If Amon-Ra St. Brown does choose Dallas, the NFL could be looking at one of the most electrifying offensive transformations of the decade. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Dallas Cowboys, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We always look forward to your comments and opinions. See you in the next.